What if you could find out the age of your brain right now and take action to make changes? Well, if that interests you, you're not going to want to miss this episode with Dr. Christine and her company NeuroAge, who's doing exactly that. And you want to stick around to the very end of the interview for some, I would say, controversial points, including should we be using Metformin to reverse aging, including aging of the brain? Should we be using some of the new GLP drugs for the brain? So definitely stay tuned to the end of the episode. You don't want to miss this very important episode on how to measure your brain age and take action to reverse your brain age and reverse and prevent Alzheimer's. This is Dr. Josh. Peace and plants. Dr. Christin Glorioso, MD, PhD, is a physician scientist, neuroscientist, and entrepreneur dedicated to combating neurodegenerative diseases through innovative approaches to brain aging. She is the founder and CEO of NeuroAge Therapeutics, a biotech company pioneering transcriptome-based biomarkers and therapies aimed at reversing brain aging. Dr. Glorioso earned her Bachelor of Science in Cell and Molecular Biology from the University of Michigan in 2002. She then pursued the MSTP Medical Scientist Training Program at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine and Carnegie Mellon University, obtaining both her MD and PhD in neuroscience in 2011. Her doctoral research focused on the genetics and molecular pathways of central nervous system aging. Following her graduate studies, Dr. Glorioso completed postdoctoral training in computational biology at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, where she studied brain aging and neurologic diseases in the laboratory of Dr. Lenny Guarente. During her time at MIT, she also served as a research scientist focusing on predictive modeling, genetics, epigenetics, and transcriptomics related to neurological and psychiatric diseases. Driven by personal experiences with Alzheimer's disease in her family and her own ApoE4 genotype, Dr. Glorioso has committed her career to developing preventative and therapeutic strategies for cognitive decline. Through NeuroAge Therapeutics, she aims to make brain aging measurable, trackable, and reversible, ultimately transforming the landscape of cognitive health. Dr. Josh here, and this sounds almost like science fiction, but what if you could predict your risk of Alzheimer's decades before symptoms appear and actually do something about it? Now, the good news is this is not just science fiction. This is happening today. And that's why I have my guest here, Dr. Christin, who actually set up a company, NeuroAge, to address exactly this. Dr. Christin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Dr. Josh. It's my pleasure to be here.
And I have to start by saying, not only are you brilliant, you've got an MD and a PhD. So not only are you brilliant, you've actually done something with that intelligence and started this company. So let me start with this question, Dr. Christin. How in the world did you get into the space?
Yeah, so I think my story really starts with my own family history of Alzheimer's disease. So when I was a kid, my grandmother suffered with Alzheimer's. My grandfather took care of her in the home. That was about a 7-year journey for them. It had a really big impact on me as a kid. I recently found out that I also have a risk gene for Alzheimer's myself, an ApoE4 allele. So the good news is that there's something you can do about it. About 40% of your Alzheimer's risk is due to lifestyle. So after finishing med school and my PhD in neuroscience and my postdoc at MIT, I decided to start NeuroAge about 3 years ago. And NeuroAge has a test that lets you track your brain aging, And we give personalized lifestyle and health recommendations to help people slow down or even reverse their brain aging and prevent Alzheimer's in the future.
That's awesome. And just to be clear, your company is now 3 years old, but people don't have to wait. They can actually use your tests today if they want. Is that true?
Yeah, we launched to consumers last December. So people can go to our website at neuroagetx.com and order the test. And we're partnered with 300 MRI clinics around the world. So we send people for MRIs locally, and it's an at-home blood test.
That's awesome. And I totally can relate to that because my own grandmother also developed Alzheimer's. And I saw how it devastated not just her, but my parents. This was when I was a kid, a teenager. They were afraid that, what's going to happen to us in 20, 30 years. So the cool thing is no longer do people have to wait and be in fear silently. They can actually proactively do something about this. So um, if we could just go take a step back though, you spent significant time in the laboratory. So not only did you get a medical degree, you also got a PhD in this field. So you know how to set this up on the back end. And would you agree that if we were having this conversation 12 years ago or 20 years ago, this would be more science fiction than real?
Absolutely. And I think until the last really 5 or 6 years, most people felt, myself included, that Alzheimer's was this monkey and lurking in the background that may or may not happen. There's nothing you can do about it. You don't even want to know your genetics because, why would you want to know something scary if there's no actionable steps? And that has really changed with recent studies that have come out showing that you can slow down progression as much as 18%. People are able to grow their brains back as measured by MRI with exercise and other lifestyle interventions. People are able to decrease the toxic proteins that build up in their brain with exercise and other lifestyle interventions. So there's really this huge actionable piece. And we're starting to think of Alzheimer's more like we think of cardiovascular risk or diabetes risk. It's something when you're a young adult, even in your 20s or 30s, that you start to track and think about and mitigate the risk for and make sure that you don't have that bad outcome later in life.
That's awesome. If we can delve deep in what tests do you have to do to measure the age of their brain?
Yeah, so we have super comprehensive testing. It has 4 parts. So the first 3 actually contribute to your brain age, and the last part is genetics. So we test genetics to see how genetically at risk you are. The more resilient you are to Alzheimer's and other diseases, the less you have to worry about the lifestyle piece. And some people are not that high at risk. Although I will say that, 30 to 50% of people without any genetic risk factors do end up developing Alzheimer's. So you don't want to completely let yourself go if you get a good genetic score. But the testing for brain aging has 3 parts. So we send people for a brain MRI in their location, so somewhere close by to them. It takes about 30 minutes to complete. The second part is cognitive testing online using our NeuroGame software. And we have a couple of those are free, so you can test your reaction time, see how you are compared to the average person of your same age and sex just on our website. And the third part are blood biomarkers. And these are unique to NeuroAge. So they're 52 RNA levels of genes. And unlike the newly approved Alzheimer's diagnostic blood test, which maybe we'll talk about later, these track your brain aging specifically. So they track Alzheimer's related genes that contribute to damage and mitochondrial dysfunction and other problems in your brain directly from your blood. And so we take those 3 parts using AI and we combine them into a single score that we call NeuroAge. It's been trained and well clinically validated in more than 500,000 people. And what we've shown is that if you're 5 years younger and you're brain aging, you're 6 times less likely to have Alzheimer's in the future. And if you're unlucky like me and have an ApoE4 allele or even 2, you can completely mitigate that risk by dropping your brain age by 5 years.
Interesting. So once you know, you can actually do something about it. And then how often do you recommend people repeat the test? I know there's different. So for example, I'm imagining you're not repeating the genetics test because that's probably not going to change much. But the other parts of the test, how often do you recommend people repeat the test?
We recommend that they repeat it yearly. If people are super concerned about it, you can see results in as little as 3 to 6 months. So if you want to be more diligent with it, you can, but we recommend yearly for people.
Excellent. So on the genetics piece, is it just ApoE4 or are you testing other alleles or SNPs?
Yeah, so we're testing 41 different SNPs plus a couple hundred rare variants. We have what's called a polygenic risk score. So it's basically the simplest way to think about it is a fancier weighted average of the risk of these 41 different genes. And ApoE4 is the biggest risk factor, so it makes up about 30% of that score. But there's another 70% of that score that's made up by these other genes. So there are people that don't have an ApoE4 allele that are more at risk than they realize. And there are people with an ApoE4 allele that are not actually as high risk as they think they are.
Fascinating. So that's the genetics piece. And I'm curious because this whole field is rapidly advancing, I think exponentially. So as we sit here today, it's 41 genes. Do you anticipate that number going up in the future?
So for Alzheimer's, maybe we'll discover new rare variants, but I think, there's been a couple 100,000 people that have been through and, they've done repeat testing in other cohorts. So I think for pure genetics, we've pretty much figured out what those SNPs are. You never know. We could find new, unusual things, and certainly epigenetics are going to be involved in the future, and there's going to be more complicated ways to do the genetic testing. But I think for now, those genes are pretty well described.
Excellent. So that's the genetics piece. Now for the other components, you're one of them is the epigenetics, and is that done through blood or a mouth swab, or how do you do the epigenetics?
Yeah, so for epigenetic testing, that is actually not part of our current
Oh,
blood
interesting.
biomarker. It's an experimental arm, so we are looking at methylation if through blood, but that is part of our clinical study that we're running. It doesn't actually contribute to a current score. So the blood biomarkers we're looking at are whole genome RNA sequencing, and we're looking at 52 RNA levels of genes.
Wow. And just so our listeners can understand, if at least if you go to your website today, it's at the very top. You can potentially sign up for a trial. That the trial that people could sign up for?
Yeah, we're currently recruiting people with Alzheimer's or mild cognitive impairment into our clinical study. That study is sponsored by the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation. So we're working with them to show that we can accurately predict Alzheimer's onset and rate of cognitive decline. There isn't an intervention part of that study right now, although there may be in the future. Right now, it's just testing. So we're offering free testing, and we do give people results, which is something people often ask, don't want to enter a trial if they don't get to understand what happens at the end, but we do give people their results.
Awesome. And just to be clear, if someone applies and goes through this trial, that separate from the other testing that we're talking about, or is it instead of, or I'm just a little bit confused.
Yeah, so we would give them a free test for all of those parts we already talked about, plus some
Okay,
additional testing.
that's
So
awesome.
epigenetics, yeah.
Awesome. And then the computer test, how long does that normally take someone to go through?
It takes about 30 minutes, and you can just do it online from the comfort of your home. It is harder than an Alzheimer's diagnostic test. So I will tell people that, even people that are completely cognitively sharp miss a lot of the questions. So, don't be frustrated or worried. If you if you miss a lot of them, it's intentionally a very hard test because we want to tell the brain aging of a 20-year-old from a 30-year-old, so we have to make it difficult. But yeah, it takes about 30 minutes.
Excellent. And then another component is specifically getting an MRI. It's an MRI of the brain. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, and there's no radiation involved with that or contrast, so it's safe to repeat. And it takes about half an hour to do that test as well.
Awesome. And so I have listeners all around the world. What countries is your testing currently available in?
Yeah, so we're rapidly expanding. So if there is a country that people are in that we're not currently in, please reach out to me. We're happy to try to get the testing set up there as well. We're currently in US, Canada, UK, Australia, Poland, Germany, and Sweden.
You're open to other countries. That's great. So, if we could go back to the the blood testing, you mentioned that there's some newer testing for tau and amyloid blood tests for those. It sounds like that's not what you're doing with this test. Is that correct?
So we are not doing that test currently, although we'd actually love to add it. I think it would be provide an additional data point for us. That would be really interesting. The accumulation of toxic proteins, which is what that test is testing for, that build up in the brain, are actually independent from what we're seeing with brain aging and additive with it. So my previous research showed if you create a statistical model and you add brain aging and you add amyloid and tau, they actually make an even better predictor. So we would imagine that the two tests would be very complementary to each other.
Got it. So, but right now, what type of tests are you doing?
So what we're doing is something that's called an organ-specific aging clock. So
Okay.
if your listeners are familiar with any of the biological aging clock companies like NeuroAge or one of these other overall biological aging tests, that's what this is, but it's specific to the brain. So the way that we developed the test is we first were able to really accurately measure the age of the brain in people that were deceased. So we had postmortem brains, and we were able to predict their age from RNA levels of genes in the brain. And then we ran a really long clinical study to show that people that were alive, we had medical records, we tested their memory, we knew whether they had Alzheimer's or not. And then at the end of their lives, they donated their brains. And so what we were able to show is that people that were 5 years younger were less likely to have Alzheimer's. They're also less likely to have pre-Parkinson's signs and had better memory, even if they didn't have a disease. So it was really predictive. So we did that hard work to tie this transcriptome test to these outcomes. And then in some of those, it's not very convenient to take a piece of someone's brain who's alive. So
True.
we had to have some way to do this in living people. And so in some of the cohorts, we had both brain and blood. And we're able to use RNA levels of genes in the blood to predict those brain ages. So it was trained on the brain ages. And so we're able to really accurately do that. So now we have these 52 RNA levels of genes in the blood are predicting those Alzheimer's and Parkinson's related genes in the brain.
That's awesome. So the simple information I was taught originally is that different organs in the body age at different rates. So for example, what I was told, I don't know if it's true or not, is that, for example, the brain is normally going to age more slowly than the skin because the skin is often exposed to lots of UV radiation, and hopefully the brain is protected in a bony structure. Does that model make any sense?
Yes, it definitely does. And I would even layer on an additional piece, which is that different people have variability in which organs are aging faster than others. So an easy way to think about it is, say you have someone who's like a super athlete, really in shape, really watches their diet, but they live in Arizona and they don't wear sunscreen. their skin is going to be aging much faster than their cardiovascular system because just from these lifestyle differences. And in other people, they may have, some genetic force that means cardiovascularly they're aging faster for, certain reasons, but they always wear sunscreen. And so their skin is actually much younger. So that's kind of why different organs are aging at different rates. And that's why not everybody gets the same age-related disease at exactly the same time. So some people get diabetes and some people get heart disease and some people get cancer and some get Alzheimer's.
What I think is one of the most powerful part of your whole program with NeuroAge is not just the different pieces to give someone the NeuroAge, but then at the end you give specific advice on how to prevent further aging of the brain. What does that advice look like normally?
Yeah, so we have, because we have all these different pieces of information from people, so the genetics, so there's some advice that's tailored to what genes they have that put them at higher risk or have better recommendations related to certain genes. In some cases, we see things on MRI. So an example would be if someone has white matter hyperintensities on MRI, which are really common with age. They're little cardiovascular blockages in the brain that cause little tiny areas of damage. Um, Almost everybody has them if they age far enough, but they are not benign, so they put you at higher risk for vascular dementia and for stroke and for Alzheimer's. And so when we see those, the recommendation is to do better with your heart health because it's really a blood vessel problem in your brain. So maybe someone had a good calcium score and they think they're fine, but they see this problem in their brain. So we say maybe you actually do want to start that statin earlier than you would, or maybe you should do a continuous blood pressure monitoring to see what's going on. So we recommend sort of more stringent cardiovascular risk factor control. And then because we're also gathering data about what people are doing to lower their NeuroAge, so we do something called the Sunday survey. So every Sunday we send out a lifestyle and health medication survey. And so we know what supplements people are taking. We know what, diets they're on, what exercises they're doing. And so then we can feed back that information to people and say, people with your biomarker profile do better with 90 minutes of zone 2 cardio than 60 or, things like that, which are very specific to what we're seeing.
Excellent. So one of the things that I've seen you present is that different people will age at different rates. You can't, and so I guess the whole purpose of this advice is to slow down the rate of aging and hopefully even to reverse the age.
Yeah, exactly. So there's more and more evidence that you can so the white matter hyperintensities I was telling you about, those are reversible. So at least partially, so you can actually do better in those and reverse that damage and actually reverse the entire age of your brain and make your brain bigger just through exercise and through lifestyle and other interventions.
Fascinating. So I saw recently you had an article on your Substack about the bad news if like you happen to live right near a golf course, that for some reason being on a golf course you're exposed to toxins like atrazine that are used to make golf courses nice and green, but unfortunately that atrazine or other chemicals can actually get into you, and that's an issue because some of those toxins can speed up aging, including aging of the brain. I'm curious, are toxin tests part of your protocol right now?
So toxin tests are not, but we do recommend that people mitigate their toxins. So I also had another post on microplastics. Microplastics actually build up in your brain. So about 6 months ago, I purged my kitchen collection from all of the plastic Tupperware and plastic bags and the coated pans. And using water bottles, I've got rid of my Nalgene's. I'm now using glass ones. So it's pretty scary, that paper. You can actually see the plastic in the brains that they showed. And that was more common in people with Alzheimer's than people without. Not causal yet, but scary enough. And with the golf courses, for most people that get Parkinson's, it's not highly genetic. It's mostly environment. There are rare families that have mutations that get early onset Parkinson's, but for most people, it's largely due to environment. And we've known for a long time that pesticides and things that treat the plants, either from farms or from other sources, are causing this risk. So there's actually a Parkinson's belt in the United States. You can kind of see it. And this recent paper came out showing that people that lived within 3 miles of a golf course were at increased risk. So you can filter out pesticides with your water filtration. So that's an easy enough fix, just another reason to filter your water. Hopefully it's not in the air. We haven't really ruled out that as a possibility.
And just being nosy here, are you going to move based on on this study, or what are you going to do about it, if anything?
Um, no, I'm just being extra careful about filtering my water is basically what I'm doing. And if I do end up on a golf course, sometimes I run through the golf course near my house in San Francisco. I'm just
Okay,
going to be careful I'm not drinking the water on the course or, I think if I don't play golf, but, or at least not very often. If I do, I think I'll be wary of the things I'm consuming and touching with them on the golf course.
fair enough. The dementia patient I saw with the highest level of atrazine, it turns out when he was a little boy, he grew up on a golf course,
Oh,
right
wow.
near a golf course, and he remembers jumping in the water and the water hazard. So maximal exposure at a young age. So yeah, it's the real deal. Wow.
So
So
you're testing for atrazine and other
I
pesticides?
I
Oh,
I
that's
I
great.
I am, and well, let me put it this way: I offer it because all these tests are expensive, but I
Yeah,
offer it because I know that one of the root causes for Alzheimer's, in my experience and from the studies I've seen, it's between 30 and 200. Some of them are toxins, and if I can lower the toxin levels, often I can slow down or reverse aging, and that's why I offer it, because there are actually things you can do to get these toxins out of your system if you know you have them.
absolutely. So how do you feel about golf courses now that you have this client that
Yeah,
has
yeah.
decided?
So I actually try to avoid them. I mean, they're beautiful green, and many decades ago I liked to golf. I don't anymore for that reason. I just want to stay away, from the toxins. And sure, I mean, you're not normally going barefoot through golf courses, but having said that, I do try to mitigate my own risk. I mean, one of the changes I've made is I try to exercise every single day because I know that's going to stimulate new neuron formation in the brain, etc. I'm curious, based on the research that you've done, and I know you've been in this field for a long time, what what changes have you made in your own personal life based on the information that you have from the basic science bench, and then also now creating a clinical company in this whole field?
Yeah. So I've been a lifelong exerciser. So I will say I kind of already had that, although I can always do more. And I particularly recommend hot yoga because it kind of checks a bunch of boxes at once. It's sauna, which is good for your blood pressure, that sort of heated meditation, which has some evidence for lowering stress and being good for brain aging, flexibility. Also, if you do rigorous one like I do, you end up doing push-ups and things like that. So it's also some resistance training. So it's kind of checks a bunch of those boxes for brain aging at once. So I try to do that 2 or 3 times a week. And then, I just turned 44. So I am in the stage of my life where I'm perimenopausal. And I was realizing that there were some disruptions in my sleep. I was a great sleeper in my 20s and teens and 30s. And then I started waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning, increasingly often, up to 5 times a week, which was horribly disruptive. And I thought it was just stress. I'm an entrepreneur, since not the
Of course.
can be a stressful job. Um, But I was reading about the symptoms of perimenopause, and one of them is just sleep disruptions. And so I started HRT actually, and that completely is the hormone replacement therapy. It's estrogen and progesterone for those in your audience, and it completely fixed my sleep. So I now only wake up um, at 3 o'clock in the morning, like once or twice a month. So my sleep scores are great on my Aura ring. That's another thing I've done. I think wearables are great. Love
Okay.
Aura. Not paid to say that. And yeah, so that's one change that I made. I also started low doses of the GLP-1 RA, so Ozempic, and I think there's increasing evidence that that's actually a longevity drug beyond just I'm not diabetic, so beyond anything related to that. So there's mouse studies that it prevents cells from dying in the brain. So I think we're going to end up with more and more studies surrounding the GLP-1 RAs and Alzheimer's prevention. So those are all the things I've done. Yeah.
Awesome. And so, for example, you mentioned hormones. I'm assuming measuring hormones is not part of your formal NeuroAge process. Is that correct?
It's not. But we are partnered with a lot of physicians, and physicians can do that. And there's also some great telehealth companies that can do that for folks as well.
Sure. And I do that in my practice, optimize hormones. But yeah, I'm just trying to understand, on the back end, where things are being tested. And you mentioned a little bit about diabetes. What and guess what? Alzheimer's has been called type 3 diabetes. And there's no question that's part of it. But what are you measuring? Glucose, like hemoglobin A1C, as part of your test?
We're not. So right now the test is really just brain aging. We're relying on our clinical partners and people's primary care physicians. But in our recommendations, we definitely have a general medical health section, and glucose control is super important for preventing Alzheimer's in the future.
Got it. What do you think about a prescription drug like metformin, which has been recommended by some anti-aging experts who say metformin potentially can turn back the biologic clock? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so it's a little bit controversial opinion, but I do not recommend metformin for people. I think that the mechanism is a little bit troubling for the brain, although that, there's some studies that say it might be helpful, but there's also some big clinical trials that show an increased incidence of Parkinson's in people that take it. And one of the mechanisms of action of metformin is to inhibit a piece of the mitochondria called complex 1 in the electron transport chain. And that's important because rotenone, which is a known pest, speaking of pesticides, rotenone is a toxin that is known to cause Parkinson's. So farm workers that are exposed to rotenone develop Parkinson's. So that's also a complex 1 inhibitor. So metformin is doing something similar to a known toxin. It's a little bit controversial. Some people say that's not really how metformin is working. And there are some animal studies that say it's protective. But for me, if there's multiple ways to treat your diabetes, I would definitely opt for a GLP-1, which seems to be much better than I would for metformin or some other way of controlling your diabetes.
That makes perfect sense, and you're exactly right. My understanding about metformin is it's a quote unquote dirty drug, as in it has so many different effects, and frankly, some of them may be beneficial and some of them may not be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so wanted, if it's okay with you, wanted to ask you some rapid questions, kind of yes, no, quick answer. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Let me pull it up. All right. So, what's the most misunderstood fact about brain aging?
I think the most misunderstood fact is that there's something you can actually do about it. So I think a lot of people think your brain ages and then that's it. You have one shot for that not to happen, but there's more and more evidence that people can improve their cognition. They can improve, their memory, their mood, their risk for later diseases. So I think that's the fact that's most misunderstood.
Awesome. What's one lifestyle habit you would personally never skip?
Exercise, I think, is one. At least, I try to exercise at least 4 times a week. It's not only good for preventing Alzheimer's, but it's also the best antidepressant there is. So it's really great for you in so many ways.
Awesome. So which brain biomarker excites you the most right now?
Can I say that I'm allowed to say? So the not so secret is that we're also a lot of the data that we're gathering from people in an anonymized way is can be used for drug discovery. So we're working, in the back end on creating some new drugs for Alzheimer's. So we do have some really exciting drug targets. So I'd love to tell you about those, but maybe maybe in the future. But I think aside from that, I think BDNF is has been promising for years. So that's brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So that's it's induced by exercise. It's like plant food for your brain, makes your neurons sprout. And so when you go out for a run or a swim or a bike ride, it gets released into and around your neurons and makes them grow. So that is a great one. The person that can make a therapeutic that does the same thing, which people are working on it, I think that's going to be a great drug that everyone's going to want.
Awesome. So if you can only pick one of these, which one is the most powerful for brain aging prediction? Is it MRI, the blood test, or the genetics test?
Yeah, so the order of prediction is brain MRI 1, blood test is a close second, and then the cognitive testing is a distant third. The reason the cognitive testing is a distant third is that people have different baselines. So, if you imagine a professional ping pong player might have really fast reflexes, and even when they're in their 70s, they might have reflexes like a 20-year-old. So that is, not going to be super predictive of how they're doing with their brain aging. But I will say that if you track it over time, how you're doing versus your younger self is makes that much more predictive.
Got it. But of the three, it sounds like MRI would be the most predictive.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So which one supplement do you think actually moves the needle on brain health?
I'm going to caveat this. Well, no, I'm just going to go with omega-3. I'm going to
Awesome.
caveat it with that it's better to get it from your diet. So if you can, 6 walnuts is 1 serving of omega-3 per day. So that's super doable for most people,
Right.
even if you're a vegetarian. But if you can get your omega-3 through diet, it's much better. But the supplements are also good if you can't do that.
Cool. So what's been your biggest aha moment while launching NeuroAge?
I think it's really connecting with people and with our clients, and how much they want this really actionable recommendation. So, when we first started off, we're like, oh, we'll just tell people their brain age and let them go fix it. But it turns out, people have a lot of anxiety. I mean, I did too. It was very scary for me to find out my own genetic risk around getting these results. And so people really want these actionable things they can do. And so now we're like very focused on, how can we bring more of that to people and really help them through the process of this. And I think it's really exciting time with AI for personalized recommendations. So I think that has been a really fun journey for us as well.
Beautiful. So what's the brain health equivalent of brushing your teeth once or twice a day?
Oh, there's so many things that you should do for your brain health. So we actually have nine different recommendations. So 9 pillars. If I had to pick just one, I would say get great sleep. Really work on your sleep. But sleep and exercise are kind of 1 and 2. And then third is community. So, really staying socially connected with other people, which is kind of a nice thing anyway, to kind of prescribe that to folks. Go out, make more friends, do more activities.
Cool. What surprised you the most about your own brain health data when you got the test done?
Yeah, it was sort of it was both scary and hugely relieving. So, the scary part was that I have an ApoE4 allele. So what that means for me, the average person has, a 5 to 10% risk of having Alzheimer's in their lifetime. My risk is more like 20 to 30%. So that's pretty high, but that's just based on genetics. And so when I found that out, especially having seen family members go through it, it was really very scary. But knowing that we could then test to see how I was doing and am I on the road to avoid that was hugely relieving for me. I also was kind of paranoid. I multitask all the time, so I forget stuff. I forget people. I forget names and faces. I lose my keys. Um,
Ouch.
so, like there's always some paranoid part in my brain that thought maybe this is the beginning, the beginning of this road. And so it was relieving to know that actually in my own brain aging, I'm, around 4 years younger. So I'd like that to be 5, but I'm pretty close to being on the road to avoid Alzheimer's myself, which feels like a weight has been lifted from me. And so I'm on this journey with other people to try to lower that number even further with these recommendations.
That's great. So it went from an initial concern to actually motivation to improve it. That's awesome. So if everyone did this one thing, Alzheimer's would drop by 20%. What is it?
Exercise? Exercise
Awesome.
daily.
Yeah, I agree with that. What's your favorite neuroscience book or paper?
So I have to say, neuroscience book. I'm a big fan of Oliver Sacks's work. So he has a book called "The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat," and it's these little vignettes in neurology about different clients. And so I think he really writes beautifully.
That's awesome. And what's a myth about Alzheimer's that drives you crazy?
So I think the biggest thing is just that there's nothing you can do about it, that people are sort of predestined to have this fate of losing their independence and, if you have genetic risk that you're going to end up definitely having Alzheimer's, and that's really not true. There's this huge amount that people can do about it.
Beautiful. And biologic age or brain age, what should people care most about?
So I think they should care most about the aspect that they're most at risk for. So I think what we're going to see with these organ ages is you're going to find out, oh, I'm a heart ager, or oh, I'm a brain ager, or oh, I'm a skin ager. And then people are going to have tailored therapies to that. You get your screening for that organ more often, earlier on in your life, and are more proactive about it. So I think getting this clarity using different types of biomarkers and different types of screening is really going to allow people to focus on the thing that is most likely to be a problem for them in their life.
That's beautiful. And you mentioned that ultimately one of the goals of your company is to develop some therapeutics.
Yes.
Realistically, though, that's not this year. That's further down the road, right?
Yeah, so we're looking at, 8 years from now would be when those drugs would come out.
Okay.
Well, we are, partnering with other people that have drugs that potentially could come out sooner, that then we can help them identify people that would be right for those drugs. So we're helping in that way in the meantime.
That's beautiful. So one thing that impresses me about your company is there are definitely other companies that are doing one piece of what you're doing, but I have yet to see anyone bringing it all together. So kudos to you to being first in this field.
Thanks.
But but one thing I thought of as you mentioned this is, are there other companies like yours in other fields where you can measure your skin health, skin age, or your heart age, or your lung age? Do you think it's going to be, yeah. Do you see other companies like yours in different organ spaces?
I mean, some of these epigenetic-based companies are doing, some new companies are doing organ ages just for each organ, just the blood test part of it. The company that I think is probably maybe bringing more of this together would be like Clearly for the heart. So they're doing the heart CT, so you get the imaging, and then you can combine that with the blood biomarkers that we have for cardiac already, right? Cholesterol and lipids. And so I think that's sort of similar. And I do really think you need all of these pieces in order to get a clear picture of each organ system. So I'm excited about that. I want to go get my heart scanned as well. It'll be fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And of course there is some relationship, right? Because if you don't have a healthy heart, you may not have healthy brain just because you're relying on the heart to get blood up there.
Absolutely. So my ApoE4 allele, which is quite common, 20% of people have one of these at least, puts you at higher risk for having high cholesterol as well. So I started to have high cholesterol and high lipids. So I actually started a statin earlier for that reason, than I normally would. So we're going to start the relationship between the heart and the brain. They're very interconnected.
Awesome. And I noticed on your website it's great for people. You give them a choice. They can, it sounds like, pay all at once. They can pay for a certain test. You haven't locked people in. It's like it's all or nothing. This is what you do. I'm just curious, are most people ordering all the tests? Are they doing a subscription? How are most people using your services so far?
Yeah, so the vast majority of people are actually just doing the cognitive testing. So figuring out where they are, because that's the most affordable sort of foot in your door to kind of ballpark see how you're doing. But for people that are doing the additional testing, most of them are doing all of the testing. So that's what
Awesome.
we've seen. But we have
Awesome.
seen people that have already have had a full body MRI from Prenuvo or for some other reason. So we are able to use those scans. So some people are uploading brain scans they've already had. And some people have already had whole genome sequencing for genetics. So we offer price reduced for just uploading your sequence that you've already had.
That's great. So it sounds like you're working people wherever they are on their testing journey. You just want to be part of it and help support them and get them the information that will be helpful for them to make decisions. On the back end, I mean, you've got a website. Is there a phone number people can call, or how does that normally work?
Yeah, we have an email address for people that are like fully clients of ours. We do give them our internal phone number. It's not listed on the website, but if you do sign up, we will support you in that way.
Beautiful. All right. So if people do want to sign up, they can, what is your website and where do they go?
Yeah, so it's neuroagetx.com. So NeuroAgetx.com. So you can go there and just sign up for the test directly. And for your audience, we're offering a discount code. So Dr. Josh 15 will get you 15% off any of our testing. And at any level that you sign up, you will start to get information from us, what the newest and latest from our newsletter about what you should do to slow down or reverse your brain aging.
That's awesome. Thanks for doing that. And then if someone wants to reach out to you personally, are you, I've seen your Substack. How can people find you online?
Yes. So you can follow me at Dr. Glorioso. So that's at Dr. my last name, Glorioso, on X. You can reach out and friend me on LinkedIn. I'm there as well. My name is pretty unusual, so it's easy to find me. And my Substack is also Dr. Glorioso at Substack. So those are the best ways to reach out to me.
Beautiful. And I'm not saying you should, but if someone wants to talk to you individually, I guess they can reach out through one of those methods, right?
Yeah, they can reach out through one of those methods. You can also email hello@neuroagetx.com. I do actually read all of those emails, so you will get a hold of me that way. We also have a partners page on our website, so we're really collaborative. We love collaborating with physicians and with researchers. You're welcome to fill out that partners form, and we'll get back to you in a day or two to set up a meeting.
That is awesome. Is there any question I should have asked but didn't ask yet?
I don't think so. I think we really covered a lot of ground. I'd just like to ask you, what are you most excited about in this space, and what kind of comes to your mind when you hear about this?
Yeah, so I found your company, I find your company extremely exciting because you bring together all these important pieces for people to make a decision on how their brain is aging. And I love your story of, we met in person at a conference, at an anti-aging conference, and you were sharing with me how, like, literally you've done research looking at cadaver brains. And I mean, you're an MD PhD, and being in that world, I don't have a PhD, I've got a master's degree, but knowing how difficult that is and your dedication to this whole field, I find inspirational that you've now created this company, and I as a physician can now use your services both for myself and for my patients and the general public to give people information that they can use. So again, as I started this, if we were having this conversation, I think a dozen years ago or even 20 years ago, this would be science fiction. But now, with literally how exponentially we're seeing improvement in all these different fields, and from MRI analysis to the epigenetics to the genetics, and frankly, what excites me is that I think we're going to see we're going to see exponential improvement as we bring this all together and create a feedback loop, because right now you're making specific recommendations, and then hopefully people follow the recommendations, and then you can actually, if you're testing every year, you can actually then see. So it's basically a closed system where it's improving, and my goal here is not just preventing Alzheimer's and brain aging. I want to reverse the age, and I see that with other organs, and I'm optimistic that we're going to see that. And I've been in this field for 7 years, reversing Alzheimer's, and to me, this is just an objective tool that we can use to basically give people their brain and their life back. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, that is the true vision. If we were as functional, as independent, our sharpest selves when we're in our 80s, 90s, and beyond. I mean, imagine what that world would look like. It would be incredible. And I think we do have the tools for that, and people are contributing to that collective knowledge by participating, by, telling us what they're doing and seeing whether it works. And we're all sort of part of this, community knowledge sharing that helps other people as well. So it's really exciting.
It's beautiful. And it sounds like a bonus is, sure, it might take 8 years, but we actually might get some medications that we can use for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, and personalized medication. So I think that's really the big thing, with the cancer field. One of the reasons we've been more and more successful at treating certain types of cancer is that they're personalized to people's biomarkers. So we know that not all types of breast cancer are the same. Some are estrogen positive, some aren't. Some chemotherapeutics will work for one thing or not the other. And so we need that same level of detail with Alzheimer's. And we're starting to see that. So even with the new blood test that was just approved by the FDA for tracking amyloid in the brain, not everyone's going to have amyloid as an issue. So there are going to be some people that drugs that work for that are good for, and some people that they're not as good for. And so by participating in this, we're gaining the knowledge about what people's biomarkers are, that then we can start matching them to the drugs that are going to work.
That's beautiful, and it makes perfect sense if you're dealing with such a heterogeneous disease where everyone's got their own unique mix of 30 to 200 root causes. You're not going
Right.
to find necessarily one drug that's going to fix everything. It's going to be personalized. And again, decades ago, this was science fiction, but we're reaching the point where even though the brain is a highly complex organ, that there's actually hope that we can use your technology to lead the way to reverse brain aging. It's just so exciting.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dr. Christin.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Josh. I
All right.
really enjoyed this. Appreciate it.
Likewise. Peace and plants.